privilege it has been to serve both as Deputy Prime Minister and also as Treasurer in a Labor government that has represented the very, very best of Labor tradition. I personally have always been driven by a deep sense of social justice, and as a Labor Party member, it's my belief that we live in a community, not in a corporation, and that there's a role for government to create wealth, working with the private sector, and to spread opportunity right around our community, and to make sure that everyone in every postcode gets a fair go. In my maiden speech to Parliament back in 1993, I should say first speech to Parliament in 1993, I made the point then that levels of unemployment, which were then around 11%, were absolutely unacceptable. The social and economic destruction that comes from prolonged and high unemployment, the destruction of communities, is something the Labor Party was formed to fight against. Which is why all these years later, I'm so proud of the record of this Labor government in dealing with the challenges of a global financial crisis and the threat of high unemployment and social dislocation that has ravaged so many other developed economies around the world. Almost alone amongst developed economies, we avoided a deep recession. And as all of you have heard me say on so many occasions, standing here in Australia today with an economy that's 14% larger than it was at the end of 2007, that's something every Australian can be very, very proud of. It brings with it its own challenges, both social and economic, but it sure as hell beats the alternative. And the alternative's on show right around the world, across almost every other developed economy. To be here in Australia with an unemployment rate with a 5 in front of it says something very special about our country and our social and economic policies. To see 1 million jobs created over the past 5 and a bit years, when jobs have been lost everywhere else in the developed world, this says a lot about the character of the Labor government over the past 5 years, and in particular over the past 3 years. It says a lot about our Prime Minister, and like you, I just watched her presentation. She is one of the toughest warriors that have ever led the Australian Labor Party. And I observed in the caucus this evening, when I congratulated Kevin Rudd, I said there's been 20 leaders of the Australian Labor Party since the federal parliament came together. And she is indeed one of the toughest of all of those. I think she's done more as a politician for our country in 3 years than many other politicians could ever hope to achieve. I'm not going to go through the list tonight, but you're all very familiar with it. Getting carbon pricing done in this country, getting it done in 3 years in a minority government, is a very substantial achievement. And you can see the flip side of that achievement in the statements that have been made overnight by President Obama. And you could go on. The progress we're now currently making in terms of fixing a broken school funding model which goes to the core of spreading opportunity in our country over the next decade, or the creation of Disability Care Australia. So indeed it's been a privilege to serve with her as both her deputy and also as Treasurer. But of course, to come here to the Parliament, you have to represent a local electorate. And the job that I enjoy the most is being the member for Lilley. As you move around your community, you hear what people have to say, you take it on board. It becomes the touchstone for your policy formulation. And for me, since I've been the member for Lilley, my electorate has always been the first place I look when I'm listening to what people have to say and when I'm trying to make a judgment about policy settings. Every decision I've ever taken as a politician has been grounded in the communities that I represent, the small businesses right across the northern suburbs of Brisbane, the working people who commute to work, the elderly, the retired, and of course the young students. So I'm proudly the member for Lilley, and I do intend to recontest the next election as Labor's candidate, because I want to do my very best to ensure that Labor does win the next election. I also want to thank some extraordinary people in my life. First of all, my family. My wife Kim, the kids Erin, Libby and Matt. You can't do this job unless your family's on board. And of course, they see the dark side of political life frequently more than the member does. They're the ones out there in the community listening to the commentary, hearing what people have got to say, and when the debate gets rancorous, they tend to suffer more than most. So you can't serve effectively in Parliament without your family, and of course in many ways they are conscripts to Parliament as well. I love them very much, and they are as committed to my work as I am, and I thank them for that. To all of my parliamentary colleagues here, both on the backbench but also in the Cabinet, we've had an extraordinarily good working relationship, a real good team work going on in our Cabinet, particularly in the last 3 years. And I want to thank each and every one of them. Many of them are lifelong friends, and there's too many really to single out tonight. I also want to thank all of my electorate office staff, headed by Lisa Reynolds, for all the great work they do out of the Nunda office in North Brisbane. Could I also thank all of my ministerial staff who are here tonight? Too many to name, but to Andrew Thomas and Amanda Robbins, the Chief of Staff and the Deputy Chief of Staff, all of these extraordinarily committed people who are here not for the salary, not for the lifestyle, but because they're committed to making our country better as well. And we can't do our job as well as we should unless we have their commitment. And the same goes to all of the dedicated public servants that I've worked with over the last 5.5 years at the Treasury, who are too frequently singled out by people in politics for all of the sins or omissions that are committed by politicians. We have an extraordinarily talented and committed public service, and they should be held in the respect that they deserve. And finally, it's true, I think, that politics is a tough business. They'd say experience can either make you bitter or better. I choose the latter. I hope I've learnt from this experience and it will shine on the better angels in my nature. I think we have to learn from these experiences, and we have to make the most of them. But I do say to all of my parliamentary colleagues that the heart and soul of the Labor Party is about making our country better, about spreading opportunity, about not leaving people behind. And of course, in this election campaign, a lot is on the line, because essentially our Conservative opponents have a view that it's the survival of the fittest. They will embrace European-style austerity economic policies. We've already seen a bit of a taste of that in my home state of Queensland through Campbell Newman. There's a lot on the line, and we all owe it to the working people of Australia, who we represent, to fight this campaign as hard as we can and as successfully as we can. But most of all, we owe that to the nation. The nation deserves a vigorous political contest. The thing that makes me so proud to be a Member of Parliament, to have been a minister, but to have been a policymaker, is just how well our nation has done in recent years. Not just economically, but socially. Around the world, developed economies are showing all the stresses and strains of becoming much more unequal off the back of high unemployment and growing social inequality, particularly through social safety nets being ripped up and torn away. Here, in this country, we've shown over the last 5.5 years that there is a different way, and that a fairer society is indeed a more prosperous society and a truly wealthy society. That's what we're all about. That's why we deserve to win the election, and it's why we can win the election against the Conservatives with their European-style austerity policies. So that's it for now. Thanks very much.